Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Live at 5 with the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. I am your host, Curator Kevin Adkisson, and today we are back along Academy Way, and I wanted to discuss something, one of the special requests from my dad, to talk about the Cranbrook street lights. And there's not too many places where a thrilling tour could be arranged talking just about street lights. But part of the magic of Cranbrook is that everything on our campus is placed here with great intention and with a great focus on design. And so Eliel Saarinen was the architect of Cranbrook's campus, and he said that the architect's responsibility was to always be designing to the next largest and the next smallest scale. So Eliel Saarinen designed teacups, he designed the furniture, he designed the napkins, he designed the logo, he designed the interior, he designed the building and the city plan. But one thing that he did not design for the whole community. So there are examples of Eliel Saarinen streetlights on campus that I'll talk about, but today we are focusing on a much later addition to the Cranbrook campus. And these are the streetlights that were built by Cranbrook, for Cranbrook, at Cranbrook, designed by Dan Hoffman. Now, Dan Hoffman was the head of the Cranbrook Academy of Art Department of Architecture, and he served as the architect in residence from about 1985 until 1996. He was known both before he came to Cranbrook and still today, where he teaches at the University of Arizona, for his dedication to craft and architecture. So the making of architecture was as important to Dan Hoffman as the design of architecture. And that's a very arts and crafts way of thinking about design, where it's not only important what the piece looks like and how you've rendered it on paper or in the computer, but also how it is produced. And that's something that was deeply important to George Booth and Eliel Saarinen in the building of Cranbrook, and it's something that Dan Hoffman brought back to Cranbrook in the 80s. Now, he designed 4 types of streetlights, and we will see them all today on our little journey, starting here on Academy Way, then we'll go to the Art Museum, and then to Institute Way and the Woodward Access Road, which I think is called Tamarack Way. So on these 3 streets, we'll see 4 different types of lights. And the first one is probably my favorite. I've heard some people call it the disc golf basket, the frisbee basket. It has this very distinct sort of mid-century modern feel to it, and it has this wonderful sort of crinkle-cut edge that's reads very sort of 50s. I think if you showed me a picture of this and said, what year was it built? I would not guess 1994, 1995. I would guess 1955. And I think with these especially, Dan Hoffman was thinking about the great mid-century modern architects and designers who came out of Cranbrook, like Charles and Ray Eames and Ralph Rapson and Florence Knoll and others. So the way these actually illuminate is that you have the light fixture here in the body of the steel pole, and then it's shining up and it's reflecting back off of this sort of crinkle-cut sheet of steel. Then there are these little steel arms that are really quite thin, very diminutive, and Dan Hoffman is able to get that really thin line by repeating the steel arm however many times it moves around. And if we get towards the top, you can see that they're just bolted into the light fixture. Now, these will kick on in a few minutes once it gets a little darker. Probably did not have to choose the longest day of the year to talk about street lights, but I know this has been a long and often requested element. So These street lights, which were installed here in the mid-1990s, around the same time that the American elm trees were afflicted with Dutch elm disease, and so this new alley of trees was planted. So you had a pretty radical shift from what had been a very beautiful arcade, a tree tunnel, with little globe street lights, just little glass balls. And I've seen some pictures that actually showed a sort of intermediate light fixture that just had a little hat with a piece of glass below it. And so part of the idea of commissioning these new light fixtures for Cranbrook was that the streetlights that we had were not very distinguished. They didn't look like Cranbrook. They didn't look intentional. And so I mentioned that Eliel Saarinen was in the business of designing environmental lighting. There is only one place on campus where you can really say Eliel Saarinen designed a street light or a park light, and that's in the quadrangle of the School for Boys, where there are really beautiful bronze cast light fixtures. And those are resting on the concrete bench. And at one point in the 1980s, those were actually reproduced. So they could have been purchased. And that's not exactly what we were thinking, in part because that light fixture was so distinctly Saarinen, but also pretty traditional in its design. And so there was a thought that with the Millennium projects, with the new natatorium, the new Institute of Science, the new studios, and the addition to Brookside School, we were hiring these young architects to come up with new ideas for the campus, and we should turn towards our own living architects to create new lighting for campus. They turned to Dan Hoffman, head of the program, and he developed these 4 different light fixtures. At the same time, we were redoing all of the campus signage and the campus logo and really rebranding Cranbrook for the new millennium. Now, this is the second light fixture and certainly the most humble and simple of them all. These are the ones that go all the way around the Art Museum, the Orpheus Fountain Plaza, and around the Art Museum pathways. Just like the crinkle cut one, you have the light source is actually here in this laser or plasma cut perforated steel panel. The light bulb is beneath that. And then you have these little steel bars that connect to a steel reflector. And this is solid, so it almost looks like in daylight that would be the light bulb, but that's just a piece of painted steel. And then one thing that was very important to Saarinen and also to Dan Hoffman was that you understand how these things are put together. So instead of hiding these little nuts and bolts, they're left exposed. So you really understand the sort of simplicity and the elegance of the construction system. That all of these, you just take a hex wrench and you attach this black steel cover, you have the steel bowl beneath it, and the light shines up. And because this is angled at this lovely little bowl, it shoots the light out and creates this little foot lamp. Now, I think these are the most lovely when you're looking at them at this low angle. So like many pieces of Cranbrook, it probably is most enjoyable when you are a sort of little kid and you're down here at 4 feet versus when you're standing at my height, you begin to sort of lose that steel bowl. Now, there is one light fixture that we're looking at that is different from all of the others, and that's the very next one here. And as you are out and about exploring Cranbrook, you might find more examples. I don't know why this one's here, and I don't know if there are others. But this light fixture has pressed into the concrete the Cranbrook Community Seal. And this is a logo that was designed in the mid-1990s at the same time as all the light fixtures by Catherine and Michael McCoy, who were head of the design department at Cranbrook. It takes the C from the Cranbrook Academy of Art logo designed by Eliel Saarinen. It adds a crane, Cranbrook, or Old English for where the crane lands. And the crane is standing in sort of 3 little areas of water representing art, science, and education. And so you have the crane sort of standing in this river representing Cranbrook's placement on the river, on the Rouge River system, and the 3 elements that form the modern day Cranbrook educational community. I do not know why this one single light fixture has pressed into its concrete the Cranbrook community seal. I was just walking by one day when I saw it there, and I don't know if that means that that one was a prototype, if that was the most important, or why exactly that ended up being here. A lot of these projects were executed by Dan Hoffman, and so again, he didn't just design it on paper. He was actually here in the field with his students and with his assistants, and maybe they had that stamp ready and they thought, we're going to stamp every light fixture, and then decided against it. The light fixtures are installed at the same time that Cranbrook is redesigning all of its graphic identity. And so these concrete signs, which this is a little bit later, this is a 2011 version of the sign, but they have on the back of the sign the logo of whatever Cranbrook program area it's centered in. So here we have the CA for Cranbrook Academy of Art. And then on the other side, you have the more clear directional signage. And so the concrete sort of is stamped with that pattern in a way that then repeats on the little light fixtures. And that gets to the moment in time that all of these were made, which it was a moment where, under the direction of Dr. Lillian Bowder, our president from the mid-1980s to the late 1990s, Dr. Bowder was attempting to create one Cranbrook. And it was really this push to, instead of thinking of Cranbrook as individual institutions, school, science, and art, we would think of Cranbrook as one community. And if we are one community, then we need to have one logo, like the little crane that we saw. We need to have one set of signage, allow people to actually know where they're going on campus. And we also should have one unifying light fixture, light system. And so the next light fixture is the potato chip light, again designed by Dan Hoffman of the Cranbrook Academy of Art Architecture Department and executed by his students and staff. Now, this one is a little bit even easier to figure out how they actually built it. You have a single steel pipe leading up to the light fixture, which is placed into the steel pipe, which then has a sort of cap that's riveted onto it. Then they bent the steel tube to create the back that holds up this wonderful sort of potato chip. And so the potato chip is acting as the light reflector. And what I think is pretty wonderful about Hoffman's designs is how the potato chip really appears to simply float over the pole. And it has this certain thinness to it that I think reveals its sort of custom construction, because I'm not sure if we were a commercial lighting design facility, if they would really take the sort of risk of having such a very thin shell, because I'm not sure that it would be, up to that 15-year warranty. And so it has this sort of lightness to it that is, I find, really wonderful. There's also a sort of inefficiency to these light fixtures. The whole idea of reflecting light down is going to be inefficient. It's something that was very prominent in Eliel Saarinen's design. Think of the living room at Saarinen House, which is illuminated through torchères, or the dormitory at Kingswood. Even the basement, the lower level, the garden level of Kingswood is illuminated through torchères, where Saarinen shines the light on the ceiling and reflects it back down. Or even at the art museum, the light fixture in the middle of the peristyle. So this is a system that, though it's inefficient, it has a tradition at Cranbrook. And it also gets to the goal of the lighting, where Lillian Bowder and Dan Hoffman weren't that concerned about people being able to walk down amid a floodlight. You're not going to be able to read a book as you walk along this sidewalk. Instead, they wanted to create these sort of pools of light as you move down the sidewalk. And so it's a romantic way of lighting. It's also in keeping with Cranbrook that instead of sort of blasting the street and sidewalk with overly lighting it all, you end up with this much more sort of lyrical way of creating a sort of foot lamp across the path. And it's really nice in the evening or at night because it's not so bright as to blind out the rest of the nature. So you're not just seeing bright sidewalk and darkness. He's actually creating these sort of soft pools of light. Now, I'd like to be able to get around one of these so that I can show you the backside. Everyone. We're passing Vanipalasma's great and enigmatic arrival feature, which I've done tours of on other Live at Fives. So scroll back after this program and you can see me discussing that interesting and strange sculpture grouping from 1994. But as we head on to the other light fixtures, I just want to be able to stand behind one of these enough so that we can see the detail of how they are connected. So, standing on this tree's trunk, and I hope that you can see these funny little steel brackets that are supporting the potato chip in the air. And it has a sort of almost like an airplane quality to it. It's very architectural how Dan Hoffman arranges to have that reflecting piece attached to the bent steel. Now, he also creates these bolts, again, so it's that arts and crafts idea that William Morris was advocating for in the 1870s in England. You know, we should understand how things are put together. We should celebrate the hand of the craftsman, brought all the way up to the 1990s. And they have a sort of simplicity to their construction. Now, if we want to see where Cranbrook abandoned its its custom streetlight interest, we have the lights from about 2006 at the Institute of Science, where the architect at that point, which was also Dan Hoffman, was going for a much more sort of by-the-book way of illuminating, where the streetlights become much closer together. It's the same over at the Middle School for Girls. The lights really are there to create even glow, and so the candle wattage is very high, it's very bright, and they're very close together. And we sort of lose that idea of the light simply providing a guided path, and we get the more sort of parking lot effect of the lights are creating, you know, you can really see everything and everywhere you're going, which on a private community like this is probably a little bit unnecessary. But also the expense and labor of designing and building custom light fixtures, you know, needs and desires change over the years. Now, our last custom Cranbrook street light is, I think, the most simple, but also one of the most effective. And that is the sort of star-field bollard. I don't know. There's the potato chip light and there's the crinkle cut light. Those are names that I have heard other people use, I think, but also at this point, maybe I have just used them long enough to think they're real names. Dan Hoffman, to my knowledge, did not name any of the light fixtures. This one is simply a sheet of steel that is wrapped around. Adam Shirley just drove by, alumni in metalsmithing. And so this is a simple sheet of steel that is wrapped in this sort of cone-like shape and then pierced with these holes. And so the light itself is, again, coming from the base. So maybe we can see the light bulb in there. And it's shining up through this bollard, and it just really reads... what you're seeing when you look at this at night is the reflection of the inside of the steel coming through these little holes. And so watch as I move the camera how the holes sort of come in and out of view, and you really get mostly negative space, and then you get these glimpses of the light coming through. And look at how very far apart these light fixtures are as you move down the road. And so we can see one is there, there's the next one, and on down. And here it's a very different idea with lighting, where for the Woodward Access Road, our Tamarack Way, they're really meant to be sort of like guiding stars. So he's created these little constellation-like bollards, and then they are deployed as if they are stars, just guiding us through. And I really see this as Dan Hoffman thinking about these lights not as street lights, not as the path to guide you. That's what the headlights on your car are for. These are simply meant to give you the path, to give you the outline of the road. And so whereas Eliel Saarinen's architecture, the architecture of Cranbrook's historic campus, is all about the pedestrian. It's all about walking the campus, entering the building, going up and down stairs or ramps and gardens. Here, Dan Hoffman and Johnson, Johnson and Roy, the architects of the street, were thinking about, can you have a Cranbrook experience at 25 miles an hour? Can you experience Cranbrook in a car? And so they do things like very gentle curves, very long stone walls in the tradition of George Booth, and then connected with these little points of light so that in the car you see these sort of glimmering pillars that guide you alongside the road. I think it really is a beautiful way to enter into the campus, especially in the sort of darkness of the street with just these little pillars of light. Of course, the over-illumination of the middle school for girls has sort of interrupted the pathway, but the idea was that you came in along this pretty dark street with these points of light, and then you got to the arrival feature, which has, again, with Dan Hoffman, who is one of the designers of this piece, Dan Hoffman places lights around the back, and then these are actually airport runway lights that are meant to create a curb of light. Now, unfortunately, these lights are no longer maintained, they no longer work, so that's something that, as this work of sculpture, of land art, architecture, approaches almost 30 years of age, it's something that we should revisit, getting these airport runway lights to work. Because what Hoffman's idea was, what I see his idea was that you come up this street with little points of light, and then you arrive here and you almost have a curtain of light coming up, and you have this very dramatic sense of arrival with the light sort of pointed straight to the sky. Don't tell the Audubon Society. Now, as we move back, I just wanted to point out that one of the signs here, where it is a community sign, so it's not part of any of the individual institutions, now we have the Cranbrook community logo that we saw on the bollard earlier, here pressed into the back of the concrete sign. So one question I often get on tours when I tell people that, this was designed by the faculty, the architect in residence, and made by the students is, so the students were paying tuition and building for Cranbrook, and that's not exactly true. I may have mentioned that here at Live at 5. The students who were the ones who were actually putting this together, it was obviously it was a teaching experience, but if you look at just how many light fixtures we have, there's only so much you can learn from building something. And so what they would do was they would either take a semester off, they would work during their summers, or they would work after they graduated. So the students were not paying tuition and building Cranbrook streetlights. They were students, but they were also alumni, and it was separate from their coursework to go over to the revived Cranbrook Architecture Office, which had a studio here on campus and then moved up to Long Lake Road. And that's where the students would work under Dan Hoffman to actually physically build all of these custom light fixtures. Now, I walked back over here to this one so that I could give you a little bit better view of the back of one of these potato chip fixtures. I wish I could zoom on Facebook Live to just show you what I think is a pretty elegant detail of the triangular sort of strut that comes across within 4 very simple welds that are connecting 3 struts to the giant potato chip. And the potato chip is of course, I think, a pretty clear reference to the potato chip chairs of Charles and Ray Eames that Cranbrook's former head of design would create in Los Angeles. So thanks so much for joining for another Live at 5 in our new horizontal format. If you have opinions on vertical versus horizontal, I'm always happy to hear them and to get feedback on what sites I feature next and what Cranbrook stories we explore together here with Live at 5. On Sunday, the Cranbrook Center will be hosting a lecture about Dr. Robert Hatt and his and Mrs. Hatt's trip to Iraq in 1953. We'll be joined by Elizabeth Rao, professor at our scholar at the University of Cairo in Egypt, who has been exploring and researching these images from Cranbrook Archives and the Institute of Sciences archive. And she's doing a pretty fascinating talk about Dr. Hatt, what she has learned from his images of mid-century Iraq. So that talk is going to be Sunday at 3. It is open to the public, so if you haven't signed up, head over to center.cranbrook.edu and you can find the free tickets to that event. I'll be back next Wednesday for another Live at 5 here on Facebook. And for the summer, the Instagram Live at 5s have returned. And so those are Tuesday at Cranbrook Center on Instagram. At the moment, we are doing the same subjects on Instagram and Facebook, so you haven't missed much if you have not been watching both. And with that, we will leave with another appreciative view at Cranbrook's custom streetlights. And who knows what the future holds about Cranbrook and what we are doing for our campus, but I would love to see a day when the community begins to reinvest in this sort of elegant, subtle, beautiful design, continuing this great Cranbrook tradition of a total work of art, where there is nothing on our campus that is not thought of, contemplated in a sense of sort of efficiency, beauty, and utility, as Dan Hoffman did for Cranbrook when he designed our